Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa bihi nasta'in. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The Honorable Datuk Ni Mustafa Jini Ahsan, Director General, Institute of Islamic Understanding Malaysia, IKIM. The Honorable Dr. Harsha Kumaranava, Chairman of International Network of Engaged Buddhists, or INEP, Executive Committee. The Honorable Dr. Chandra Muzaffar, President of International Movement for a Just World, JUST. Tan Sris, Datuks, Datins, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. A very good morning and a warm welcome to the Institute of Islamic Understanding Malaysia, IKIM, for an International Buddhist-Muslim Forum on Peace and Sustainability organized by IKIM, International Network of Engaged Buddhists, INEP, and International Movement for a Just World, JUST. To begin our ceremony this morning, for our Muslim brothers and sisters, let us recite Surah Al-Fatiha. Ameen. Ladies and gentlemen, today's program is now live telecast and can be watched on TV IKIM. Without further ado, I would like to invite the Honorable Datuk Ni Mustafa Jini Ahsan, Director General, Institute of Islamic Understanding Malaysia, IKIM, to deliver his welcoming remarks. Let me begin by reciting Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful. Yang saya hormati sahabat pada majlis, Saya Ahmad Nazri, yang bahagia Profesor Datin Dr. Azizah binti Bahaduddin, Deputy Director General of IKIM, yang bahagia Dr. Chandra Muzaffar, Chairman of International Movement for a Just World, JUST, Mr. Sulat Sivaratsa, Founder and Co-Chair, Advisor Committee of International Network of Engaged Buddhists, INET, Dr. Harsha Navaratna, I hope I pronounced it correctly, Chair of Executive Committee, INET, Mr. Anas Zubaidi, Secretary General of JUST, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very pleasant morning I bid to all of you. On behalf of the Institute of Islamic Understanding Malaysia, IKIM, I would like to take this opportunity to welcome all participants to the forum with the hope that this event will serve as a platform for knowledge and experience sharing among us on issues that are of concern to all mankind, regardless of religious belief, race, culture, and nationalities. IKIM believes that a program like today's will pave the way for discussions that would enable participants to understand the Islamic and Buddhist perspective on peace and sustainability, and hope that this understanding would bring about positive impact to the society. I would also to first of all extend my happiest congratulations to the respective committee from INET, JUST, and also IKIM for the collaborative efforts in organizing the International Buddhist-Muslim Forum on Peace and Sustainability today. This forum is held with the objective to share the thought and ideas of religion, especially the Islamic and Buddhist perspective, in addressing issues confronting societies and community in today's globalized world. Ladies and gentlemen, since its establishment in 1992, IKIM has continuously strived to provide the right understanding of Islam to the masses. These include organizing national and international programs on topics and issues relating to Islam that are pertinent and relevant to all segments of the society. IKIM employs this as an avenue to educate and inform the general public on the Islamic approach and understanding with regard to this important issue. Today, IKIM has also conducted almost 35 interfaith programs comprising of dialogue, forums, and seminars that focus on various religious perspectives on important issues that are of great concern to humanity and world civilizations. This program has evolved prominent local international Muslims and non-Muslim figures who champion interfaith dialogue for peace. At the international level, IKIM is also well known as an institution that promotes the understanding of Islam to the Muslims and also to the people of other religions or other religious faith. Last year, IKIM was honored to have received the visit of Her Royal Highness Princess Mahachakri Siridor and the delegates from Chula Chokla Royal Military Academy of Thailand. Her visit signified recognition of IKIM's role as an institution that promotes Islam as a peaceful religion, that encourages mutual understanding and also respect towards people of other religion and culture. Besides this, IKIM's own fellows are constantly invited to international meetings such as the Asia-Europe Minister Meeting ASEAN on Interfaith Dialogue. Indeed, a few years ago, I did participate in Seoul, and one of the sections discussed about the economic issues. And I represent Malaysia, and I put forth my idea as to how Islam sees and how we organize the economy. And my other colleague from Thailand, from one of the University of Thailand, also presented from the Buddhist perspective. But I was a little bit not happy because there are other religious groups, but they are not sharing from the Jewish perspective, from the Christian perspective, from Hindu perspective. I would also like that kind of sharing of or engaging in as to how one approach the organizing the economy, not reacting to what's happening in the world, but definitely because we as believe in religion, we believe that our religion does provide an approach that contribute to how we organize the economy. You can see that how the humanity, half of the world, 60% of the world populations are below poverty line. How did you explain that? Disparity are getting wider, poverty is on the rise, unemployment is increasing, cost of living is becoming beyond beyond that we can think of. This is a result of the system and also the individual that subscribe to certain belief and ideology. In June this year, IKIM organized a regional symposium on Islam in New Era of ASEAN, which included a session on dialogue among various religions in ASEAN context. The symposium, which was officiated by the Prime Minister of Malaysia, Yang Amat Berhormat Datuk Seri Najib Tun Abdul Razak, has managed to gather participants from different religious backgrounds, civil society, organization, academic institutions, and government agencies. Apart from these two major events, IKIM also conducted a series of dialogue on environmental issues and bioethics, which include sharing of perspective from religious leaders in Malaysia this year. As part of IKIM's mission to enhance the understanding of Islam among Muslim and non-Muslim, the institution also carries out numerous research activities and publications on Islam that can serve as a source of information and knowledge for the public. The researchers in IKIM are engaged in a number of research works and writings which highlight the universal values and principles of Islam, including principles regarding engagement with non-Muslims that are all-encompassing and relevant to all mankind. After 20 years since its establishment, IKIM is still committed to do what it does best, that is to disseminate true knowledge and understanding of Islam that will advance society in all areas such as in economic, politics, culture, law, intelligence relations, environment, science, and others. Ladies and gentlemen, this morning also allow me to share a few words on peace and sustainability. The religion of Islam is based upon the promotion of peace or salam. The term salam occurs more than 40 times in the Quran and has indeed become the standard form of Muslim greeting. Assalamu alaikum. Salam means inner peace, tranquility, dignity, and fulfillment. It comprises both external and internal security, that all that is evil, both physical and spiritual, comprehensive of individual and social security. Salam means spiritual progress and real freedom, freedom from all moral conflict and anxiety, by means of acquiring true knowledge, doing good works, and being kind to all living beings. Salam means peace with God, with one natural environment, and within oneself. The enemy of peace and sustainability are materialistic ideologies, which believe that material progress is the only thing that is important. Materialistic view promotes an obsessive, striving exclusively for more and more comforts, more and more material goods, greater power over fellow human beings, greater power over nature, and non-stop technological progress. Materialism distrusts any religious statement and refuses to submit to any absolute moral imperative. To achieve more and more material success and power, such a society reject all religious consideration and standard of morality. Rather, religion and ethics are considered obstacles in the path of unlimited development and progress. Religion is considered opium for the people. The unlimited and unprincipled development enables materialistic society to achieve outward comforts and position of strength in the shortest possible time. However, unlimited development also damages global nature ecology. It corrupts economy, politics, and culture. Because the present-day dominant culture is utterly materialistic, it is also self-destructive. It threatens mankind with previous unimaginable economic and ecological disaster. For example, across-boundary pollution of land, air, water through industrial urban waste, a progressive poisoning of plant and marine life, genetic malformation in man's own body through an ever-widening use of drug and chemical, overfishing of the oceans, and the gradual extinctions of many species of flora and fauna essential to human well-being. To all this may be added the rapid deteriorations of man's social and family life, the all-round increase in sexual perversions of LGBT, state terrorism, criminal violence, and war. All this is an outcome of man's oblivion of Allah and of all absolute moral value. As opposed to existing model of development, Islam demands that social life must be subordinate to definite ethical principle and restraint. Religious ethics is very much like a brake to check on man's selfishness and power hunger. As such, it is this moral consideration and religious restraint that can free a community from self-destruction. It is this ethical consideration and spiritual restraint that can bring about sustainability and a more enduring socio-economic development. The Islamic approach to development is comprehensive and dynamic. It requires man to be continuously friendly with nature. Man needs nature, and man is accountable to God in the way he uses God's resources. In whatever project we undertake in the names of development, we must always strive to maintain a harmonization relationship with the nature. Ladies and gentlemen, it is our greatest hope that a program like today's forum will be another significant chapter to IKIM's endeavor of promoting Islam as a religion that is in harmony with human nature and a religion that promotes and creations of society that can live together in prosperity, harmony, with the feelings of mutual respect for each other, regardless of race and religion. Finally, I would like to take this opportunity again to thank INET and just for initiating ideas for today's forum. It's our sincere hope that the participant will benefit from the sharing of information and perspective from the panels, as well as through interaction with other participants who are here today. Wallahu a'lam, Allah knows best. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Datuk Ni Mustafa, for the remarks. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to call upon the Honorable Dr. Harsha Kumaranava, Chair of International Network of Engaged Buddhists INEP Executive Committee, to deliver his welcoming remarks.
Most venerable spiritual teachers and venerable Mahasangha, and let me first thank Dr. Mustafa, Director General of IKIM, for giving us hosting this conference here. dear brothers and sisters, most distinguished invitees. On behalf of the International Network of Engaged Buddhists, I am pleased to welcome you to the International Buddhist-Muslim Forum in Peace and Sustainability. It is a great privilege to be here with all of you today. I was born in a small fishing village in southern Sri Lanka. In my village, most of the people were Buddhist, but in the community next to ours, most of the people were Muslims. When I was a child, we didn't call our Muslim neighbors by name. Instead, we called them uncle, aunties, brothers and sisters. We would go for their festival events and they would come to ours. If a family had an issue, people from both communities would come together to help. There was real peace and coexistence in those days. My small community didn't just talk about metta, loving kindness, they practiced. Our elders taught us that everything starts with the mind. A mind with love brings out loving kindness. A mind with anger brings out hatred. Our speech and our action are all based on our mind. They taught us that if we practice mindfulness, our thoughts, speech and action would be peaceful. When that happens, society will become peaceful. There will be harmony and prosperity. Our elders based their advice on their understanding of Dhamma. For them, it was the core ethics and values of their Buddhist tradition. It was a practice and lifestyle. When a person practices Dhamma, anger and hatred do not arise. Today, when I travel overseas, many people ask me how it is possible that Buddhist community could give a rise to so much violence. How did we go from the peaceful village of my youth to ethnic riots and full-scale war? The past 30 years have been a very difficult period in Sri Lanka. Tens of thousands of civilians were killed. Hundreds of thousands were displaced from their homes and communities. People lived in camps or fled the country as refugees. There were assassinations, bombing, suicide attacks, massacre, abduction, disappearance. Travel and transport of goods were restricted. Livelihood were disrupted and resources were destroyed. Traditional values were abandoned and social networks torn apart. Displacement and war increased division along religious and ethnic lines. My generation grew up in a regular contact with people from all of Sri Lanka, all the communities. But today, most people under age of 30 do not have that experience. They live in separate areas, attend separate school, and speak separate languages. This isolation contributes to mistrust and fear. Other groups become abstract and are easily stereotyped. During this period, some people that should have been teaching basic human values, parents, school teachers, religious leaders were teaching hatred. There are Buddhist leaders in Sri Lanka who promoted violence to protect Buddhism. From their perspective, Buddhism had been wiped out in India and Sri Lanka was last remaining refuge. They felt responsible for protecting Buddhist culture and Buddhist teaching by whatever means necessary. This attachment to identity can lead to all kinds of suffering. Sri Lanka offers a valuable lesson to difference between Buddhist as an identity and Buddhist as practice. This is a trend we are seeing throughout the region. Our traditional Asian cultures emphasize cooperation, looking after each other, and religious practice. Our globalized modern society emphasizes competition, individual aspiration, and religious identity. This has given rise to greed, hatred, and waves of violence. Fortunately, many people across the region are working to address this trend and review our core values. On last June 16 this year, International Network of Buddhist and Just World and Religious for Peace organized a dialogue in Bangkok. They brought together Buddhist-Muslim leaders from throughout South and Southeast Asia, including India, Indonesia, Malaysia, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, and Thailand. To address escalating tension and the spread of hatred across the region, I would like to close my sharing the commitment to action that they developed in Bangkok. I quote, "We recognize these challenges facing the two communities in the region. 1. Rise of extremism, hate speech, and campaigns and instigation of religious discrimination and violence. 2. Prejudice, fear, and hatred caused by ignorance, misperception, stereotyping, negative impact of traditional and social media, simplification and generalization, and communal pressure. 3. Misuse of religion by certain religious, political, and other interest groups and individuals. 4. Socio-economic dimension of conflict, and 5. Spillover effort across the region. We are also deeply aware that if Buddhist and Muslim communities can overcome these challenges that confront them, there is a tremendous potential for the growth and development of ideas and values that may help to transform the region. Buddhist and Muslim philosophers embody gems of wisdom about the purpose of life, the position and the role of human being and her relationship with all other sentient beings and nature, which could well liberate contemporary civilization from its multiple crises. The young in these two communities in particular should be imbued with these profound ideas and values about life and its meaning." Unquote. The purpose of today is to contribute to this process. We have an opportunity to listen, learn from each other. We have an opportunity to discuss the core values we share. We have an opportunity to look at how to go forward to build a better world where we all can live together. Thank you so much.
Thank you to the Honorable Dr. Harsha Kumaranava, who is actually Chairman of International Network of Engaged Buddhist Executive Committee. On behalf of International Movement for a Just World, JUST, now I would like to invite Mr. Anas Zubeidi, Secretary General of JUST, to deliver his welcoming remarks.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Harsha, brothers and sisters, on behalf of JUST, may I begin this short welcoming speech with the Muslim greetings of peace. Assalamu alaikum, may the peace be upon you. JUST as an organization has been active and serious about Buddhist-Muslim dialogue, cooperation, peace promotion, conflict management, interreligious harmony, and working towards common action since the 90s. We have worked with Buddhist groups both locally like Soto Gakkai in Malaysia and internationally like Santi Pracha Dharma Institute, SPDI, and International Network of Engaged Buddhists, INEB. In June 2006, SPDI, INEB, and JUST jointly organized a Buddhist-Muslim dialogue theme Buddhists and Muslims in Southeast Asia working towards justice and peace. This dialogue gave birth to a significant document, the Dusit Declaration. The Dusit Declaration outlines what could and should be done for peace. The month of June seems to be very on for Buddhist-Muslim cooperation. On is a Hokkien word that can be loosely translated as special and or as auspicious. This is because earlier in June this year, a consultation was co-organized by INEB, Just and Religions for Peace to address the escalating tensions and potential spread of hatred between our two communities across the region. Our good work must continue. As such, if you do not mind me using the language of the young, it is awesome that today INEB and JUST are again working together to increase understanding, develop mechanisms of collaboration, promote interfaith dialogue and interfaith friendship between Buddhists and Muslims. This forum is one of the follow-up of the June endeavor. Our efforts must not stop. We must stay the course and remain resilient. It is doubly awesome that in this forum we join hands with Institute of Islamic Understanding Malaysia IKIM, and this forum of peace and sustainability is organized in conjunction with the biennial conference of INEB, which will be held at the Buddhist Mahavihara the next few days. To the delegates, I wish all the best, and I have strong convictions that you will not only enjoy and benefit from the sessions, but also contribute ideas and actions in bringing peace and sustainability. Your input, reflections, and thoughts will help broaden our effort to bring forth values of peace and compassion from our two great traditions into daily living and daily human engagement. Perhaps in wanting the world to change for the better, in asking fellow humans to embrace peace and justice, we could ponder the Buddha's advice in Dhammapada 103. Though one should conquer 1,000,000 men in the battlefield, yet he indeed is the noblest victor who has conquered himself. Furthermore, the Quran in chapter 13 verse 11 stresses that verily never will God change the fate or condition of a people until they change themselves. In other words, in our effort to change the other, we must first change ourselves. In short, it is when Buddhists become better Buddhists and Muslims become better Muslims, that is when our efforts to create peace and understanding will gain solid ground. On behalf of the President of JUST, Dr. Chandra, and the EXCO members of JUST, I would like to extend my warmest thank you to everyone who has worked hard in making this project a success. Most special thanks to these following good people who should be accorded a special mention. Mr. Ho Kek Hua, and the Deputy Director General, and Mr. Chan Tak Singh, the Director of the Religious Relations Unit from Jabatan Perbuatan Nasional and Integrasi Negara, Prof. Azizan, the Deputy Director General from IKIM, Puan Sarina, the Head of Program Unit IKIM, Puan Sapwa, the Head of PR Unit IKIM, Mr. Vidya, the Organizing Coordinator at INEB, Ms. Diana Louis, the Organizing Coordinator at INEB, Ms. Ling Ziwei, the Organizing Coordinator of INEB, and last but not least to Ms. Fa Yan Yin, our young project coordinator of JUST, who humbly and conveniently avoided to list her name here when I asked her to list the people I should give thanks to. I began this speech with the Muslim greetings of peace, but now I would love to end the Buddhist salutation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you very much, Mr. Andras Zubedi. Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored today to have with us 4 distinguished panelists for this Buddhist-Muslim Forum on Peace and Sustainability Forum. They are Yang Berbahagia Professor Datin Dr. Azizan binti Baharudin, Deputy Director General of IKIM, Dr. Chandra Muzaffar, President of JUST, Arjan Sulat Sibaraksa, Founder and Co-Chair Advisor Committee of INEP, and also Reverend Alan Sanoki, Advisory Committee of INEP and Clearview Project, United States of America. As for the moderator for this forum, it would be the Honorable Professor Muhammad Hazim Shah, Deputy Director, International Institute of Public Policy and Management, University of Malaya. Without further ado, I wish to invite Professor Muhammad Hazim Shah and all other panelists to begin the session. Ladies and gentlemen, today's program is broadcast live on IKIM's website TV, which can be watched at www.tvikim.my. Once again, at www.tvikim.my. And for those of you who have received the receiver from the secretariat of this program, you can tune to 2 languages, channel 2 for Burma, and for the channel 3 is Thai language. So I will now hand over the session to the Honorable Professor Muhammad Hazim Shah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning to all of our present here today. We have with us 4 distinguished panelists whose names have been mentioned earlier, and I believe we've been given time until about 11:30 or so. So according to my calculation, that would mean that each speaker would have roughly about half an hour. Yeah. And I believe that we also have a question and answer session, is that right? There is a quick Q&A. I will briefly read the biodata of our distinguished panelists today. Our first speaker will be Professor Datin Dr. Azan Binti Baharudin, who happens to be my colleague at the University of Malaya. She received her BSc Biology from the University of Tasmania, Australia, and an MSc from University College London, and a PhD in Philosophy of Science from the University of Lancaster, UK. She specializes in several areas, such as environmental, bioethics, science, religion and development, interfaith and intercivilizational dialogue. She has published widely in all these areas. She is also active in several NGOs that are connected with development, as well as being a member of various advisory and consultative committees for ministries. She was director of the Center for Civilizational Dialogue at the University of Malaya for, if I'm not mistaken, about 10 years or so. Currently, she is professor at the Department of Science and Technology Studies, as well as the Deputy Director General of IKIM, which is the Institute of Islamic Understanding in Malaysia, where one of her major functions is to encourage interfaith dialogues and related research locally and internationally. So, Professor Azan will be our first speaker today, and I believe if this piece which has been given to me is correct, the title of the talk is Religion, Peace and Sustainability. So without further ado, may I invite our first speaker, Professor Azan, to give a presentation, please.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani. Yang berbahagia Datuk Mustafa bin Hassan, Director General of IKIM, Dr. Hasha Kumara Navaratne, Chair of INEP Executive Committee, Dr. Chandra Muzaffar, President of JAS, Ajahn Sulak Sivaraksa, Founder and Co-Chair Advisor Committee of INEP, Mr. Anna Zubedi, Secretary General of JAS, and Reverend Alan Sinauki, Advisory Committee of INEP and Clearview Project USA. Beloved participants, brothers and sisters, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning. And I thank the Almighty for enabling my sharing with you this morning. I will begin with reminding all of us, as we have been reminded this morning, of the huge potential for the role of Muslims and Buddhists in ASEAN to begin with, or perhaps even before that in Malaysia. And you can see the percentages of our members, 42% 42% Muslims in ASEAN and 40% Buddhists. Worldwide, 25% Muslims and 6% Buddhists, and in Malaysia, 60% Muslims and 90% Buddhists. So can we, as a group, lead the way? And we say this with the greatest humility, of course. This is not to deny the opportunities and the potentials of our other brothers and sisters in the other faith traditions. But certainly where we are at now, as we have listened to the speeches before this, we should certainly wake up and do something and not simply imagine. Imagination will not get us very far. We must start action now. And again, we can actually obtain assistance from the world of science and from the secular world. I hope you will not be confused when I use the word science in secular world. I don't mean to create more divisions here. What I mean is from conventional knowledge areas such as conventional economics, conventional science and technology, we do actually have discoveries, recent discoveries that actually point to the fact that the spiritual world, the spiritual reality can be acceptable in conventional terms. And again, why do I keep on emphasizing secular and conventional? Because half the world, despite them saying that they are religious, actually think, feel, and behave in the conventional, non-spiritual manner. And again, I do say that, wanting to point fingers, but this is the reality. And I will remind all of us again that compassion is key. Just now you saw one of the names of Allah who Muslims pray to is the beneficent, the compassionate. And this is also key in Buddhism. Compassion, mindfulness results in compassion. Compassion begins with mindfulness. And I think more often than not, in religious terms, we are very good at the theory, but when it comes to the practice, we need to do much more. We need to transform ourselves and make these theories in religion work for sustainability, for peace. And compassion is the ground of our common humanity. For Muslims, Bani Adam, this is Arabic, which means Homo sapiens, in conventional terms. And compassion is the basis for ethical and spiritual traditions, actually, for the very things that we are facing, the polarized world, the extremism, we heard about this morning. And most of all, and this is what I am close to in terms of my training, nature. We have a huge disrespect for nature. We don't realize it. We do it all the time. And I hope with the small sharing this morning of some facts and figures that the religious people, that is us, will take note and make use of all this practical data in terms of our argumentations for persuading our audience, our clients, if you like, our so-called religious friends and family members and societies to move towards business sustainability, because sustainability today is a huge issue. Right, and our beloved Director General has already described to you the activities that IKIM has been involved in. We're very, very proud to share this with you. I'm sure INET has done marvelously as well in terms of Buddhist-Muslim dialogues, and the latest that the Director General has attended was in Bangkok, and humbly I was also able to be one of the Buddhist-Muslim dialogue in October. And here, the overall objective was to restore compassion as the driving force of morality, ethics, and religion, and reclaiming wisdom in the tradition, rebranding it for the future. You know, we say, have compassion, practice compassion, and then we do the mantras, and we hope that compassion will arise. But I realize that has been touched upon by our colleague from Ceylon just now, from Sri Lanka just now, that with the young people, you have to speak another language. With the professionals, the secularized, unintentionally secularized professionals, you have to speak another language. And here I would like to, again as I said just now, share with you some of the so-called scientific data that can be adopted in our so-called language, mission language in promoting peace and sustainability. I call this a systems from science. This is not to put science down or to be condescending toward the scientific fraternity. I'm sure many of you are scientists yourselves, and we can speak actually of a phenomenon called the re-spiritualization of science today. The scientists will not say this, but if you read the literature, the latest discoveries, the latest analysis, and so on and so forth, you will see that just as there was a de-spiritualization of religion that took place several hundred years ago in some parts of the world, okay, we will not use east, west, north, south because that's again divisive. Now there is a re-spiritualization happening. And the history of science and religion will tell us that it is very important for science and religion, and by science I mean all knowledge systems that purport to provide us data about reality, about nature. And the history of science, it shows us that it was science, it was the failure, if you like, not of religion, but those of us who are interpreters of religion in the past to accommodate science within its framework of thinking that led to the division between science and religion. And one of our philosophers, Bertrand Russell, says that the future of humankind rests upon the relationship between science and religion. And today I hope we can share this. In fact, some scientists are saying that, these are secular scientists, they are saying that compassion is actually the means, the mechanism by which the further evolution of mankind will take place in the future. That without compassion, humankind will stop being what it is. And this new area is called noetic science, and it takes on a holistic view of reality, unlike before. And today also there is a new field of knowledge called the science of sustainability or sustainability science, where you have a group of engineers and sociologists and people of the humanities work together towards solutions that are holistic. So I also read, we can also read from the literature that what is happening is, I want to move from war, from words that connote violence to nicer words. And we were reminded this morning, our words, our thoughts, our intentions, they actually matter. In the physical world, what we intend, be careful because it does affect the reality around us, and it has been physically shown to be true, to be proven to be true. And let's move towards epistemological dialogue. And what are we talking about here? Basically, the whole planet, if you like, is divided in terms of our epistemology, our notions of what is the truth and the sources of truth. So half of us believe that it comes from religion, half of us believe that it's all up to our rational thinking. So this epistemological war, if you like, okay, gives rise to two types of worldview. Okay? One is man-centered, the other one is life-centered. And the man-centered worldview describes man as the most dominant, and we are the species that can and should benefit from the planet, the whole of the planet, from the other species, and the whole of creation is meant for us only. And all the other species merely have instrumental value. Now, I see the role of compassion in Muslim and Buddhist outlook here. So when we teach our students, when we own corporations, when we own companies that produce this and that, when we own a government, whatever you like, we can influence ourselves and the mode of our working towards a life-centered worldview and not dismantled worldview. And this is a very arrogant worldview. We are planet's most important species, and we exist apart from, okay, and are in charge of nature. And there is always more resources for us, and all of it is for us. And all forms of economic growth is good. A healthy environment depends on a healthy economy. And our success depends on how well we can understand, control, note the words used, control, manage, okay, utilize, manipulate, okay, everything around us for our benefit only. Again, okay, we as Muslims and Buddhists have important work to do, okay, important mission to do. First, just on the basis of our worldview and understanding of what and why we are here and how we should lead our lives. And we want to move towards a life-centered worldview, which is a worldview that works with the planet. Nature exists for all of us species. There's not always more. And some forms of economic growth are simply not beneficial. And a healthy economy actually depends on a healthy environment. And environment meaning we are part of the environment itself. And we, being the physical environment, also create a social, political, cultural environment. And our success depends on learning to cooperate with one another and with the rest of nature. And you know, these principles are developed not by religious scholars but by the secular scholars themselves, because after 30-40 years of deep ecological knowledge, they've come to realize that science is now telling us you better take note that you are not to be the most important species. You are not the most important species. So this is the nice thing, this is what we mean by science is now coming to our existence, and we should grab this opportunity. And I don't mean to sound opportunistic. I think there's halal opportunism and there's also haram opportunism. So perhaps I'm talking about good opportunism. Because we're talking about developing partnerships. We're talking about going forth, gathering all the good forces in the world today. And there are problems perceived to be associated with us because we lack the skills in encountering people of other religions, as well as those who are secular and humanistic, quote unquote. And if we don't have this dialogue skills, we're going to produce what you see on the images, wars, conflicts, and so on. The Reverend just now spoke about how he wishes things are back like when he was a small child. Why is it that people were okay then? Because I think at that time we just did dialogue naturally. And then we became conscious of what we were, and we started fighting. And there's not enough effort at ensuring quality religious education. I say this with the greatest humility. How do we actually educate our younger ones religion? How do we teach religion? Is it the same way, by we say blind following, or do we include the reasons, justifications by linking what religion says to what reality is? Because the young people today can just, with a press of a button, find out anything about the world. But guess what? They cannot ask questions about what God is, who God is, why God is, why religion is, why? Why do we let this happen? And then we arrogantly walk around and look down on people saying that they are irreligious, they are irreligious, they are non-religious, they are anti-religious. Well, whose fault is that? So I think it is my fault, because I'm not, telling it as I should be telling it. Therefore, I think there is a need for religion to support sustainable development. And the word sustainability we will encounter just after a few minutes now, through what I think is the spiritualization or spiritualizing of science and economics and politics and what have you, or the enrichment of knowledge with ethics. Let's look at sustainability. We need to understand, we're talking about peace and sustainability. Sustainability is not merely a concept, that's floating around. It's a real serious business in the world today. And if you look at the literature, so many organizations, so many people actually using sustainability as a kind of their working model. And there's a social, economic, and environmental segments. Those of you familiar with this? Sorry if I'm just revising it for you. And again, if you are from a religious perspective, and you look at sustainability and its challenges, sustainability, its sister concept is sustainable development. People define sustainable development as development that fulfills the need of current generation without, stopping, without reducing the capacities of future generations to fulfill their needs. And people say this as a matter of fact without understanding the human nature, as was discussed before this. We don't really understand what drives the human being. And herein, I think, lies the heart of our mission, which is to make people understand who and what the human being is. And compassion is the heart of the functioning of the human being. So we don't have time today, but definitely there is an Islamic perspective on this. Definitely there will be a Buddhist perspective on this, and so on with the other kids. And guess what? There is not a secular perspective on this. And what I'm sharing is the secular perspective, in the sense that scientific data is telling you that the reality is shouting back at human beings to stop gross polluting, gross destruction of nature. So we need a language that can bridge 1, 2, 3. And from the scientific dimension, from totally scientific and secular point of view, there are centers such as this Center for the Science of the Greater Good, okay? And also this Institute for the Study of Noetic Sciences. And what does noetic means? Inner knowledge. What is inner knowledge, guys? What is inner knowledge? Ask a scientist, what is inner knowledge? He cannot answer it without our help. And I don't say that with a condescending attitude. Again, we don't want to be condescending. So there are enough evidences, there is enough work from let's say, from Muslims in Salat and other areas of our ibadah, of our rituals, and also for the Buddhists. And yes, number 7, no, we are not engaging in pluralism, please, because that is one hantu, it's Halloween around the corner. Okay. Those who are Malaysians, okay. Pluralism is something that is touted to be one of the outcomes of interfaith dialogue. So please, those of us who feel that we are putting religions to be on the same platform or whatever it is, making religions the same, all religions are the same, and they're not saying that at all, they're not going in that direction at all. So what comes out of these so-called scientific centers are arguments, proof, experimental evidences that show that religious practices, okay, actually are creating a greater good. Okay, so 6 habits of happiness worth cultivating. It's very simple. Things like paying attention, mindfulness. Things like giving thanks, shukr. Things like dropping grudges, forgiving others. Things like practicing kindness, keeping friends close, keeping your relations important to you, and regular exercises. Worship like the salat is supposed to be good for Muslims in the physical aspect as well. So guess what? Even simple things like this, secular-minded, the man-centered worldview people need science to prove to them. Well, there is science that proves to you now. These things are now measurable, these things are shown. If you do certain things, if you do dua, if you do zikir, if you do mindfulness, you do get these outcomes. So we will go very quickly now. Why did sustainability arise on the scene? It came out, I think you know this, a couple of decades ago. It was a response to the failure of the Second World War development strategies to help improve the lot of impoverished people. And again, as Dr. Nick has already touched upon, the gap between rich and poor is disturbing. We are facing dwindling resources, energy price rise, climate catastrophe, biodiversity diminishing. Yeah, those who are very advanced in their spirituality may say, wow, this is really beneath me, I don't deal with these items. Fine, if you're already in nirvana, very good, congratulations. But I think for Muslims, especially, we're supposed to do da'wah. And what is the da'wah? We're supposed to remind others of the truth. So I think if we know some of these facts, like our representative is an expert in economics, okay, he always succeeds at making the points because he has his economic knowledge. So what we're seeing now is in terms of sustainability, physical sustainability, social sustainability, economic sustainability, you have to know what causes energy price rise, what causes climate patterns shift, and what is the effect, what causes dwindling of resources, greed, okay, greed and abuses and misuses of man's capacity to use nature. And in 1983, Harlem Brundtland was the person who started the whole discourse concerning sustainable development or sustainability, where in 1987, her commission was established in 1993. 1987, she came up with a report, and the imperative that needed to be corrected or needed to be addressed is the issue of imbalance. Okay, and I won't go because we need the time for our other colleagues. But I just want to say that the sustainable definition sounds optimistic, but it is laced with challenges and contradictions. This is in the language of the secular thinkers themselves, because they realize that at the end of the day, if the heart, if the kalbu of the human being is not moved via compassion, okay? Because sustainable development means that the wealthier must look at those who are in poverty, and poverty is one of the challenges, great challenges of sustainability, then sustainable development will not work, okay? And for the Muslims, we have the principles of Fardu Ain, not Fardu Ain, sorry, and Fardu Kifaya, wherein man needs to have knowledge about who and what he is in relation to God, but he also has the knowledge and skills and practices to help society for the greater good. So causes of unsustainability, we need to know as religious people. First, population, wealth and consumption. In 2011, there's 7 billion of us. 20% of the wealthy in the world is contributing 40% of carbon emissions. This is a measure of consumption and pollution, if you want. Now, this is not to just simply put a blaming finger onto the rich. Being rich is not a dosa. Being rich is not a sin. This is where religion can regulate wealth in human beings. And climate change, okay, one of the effects is the warming effect, very small changes in the temperature, but even very small, the effects are very devastating. For example, because of the warming, we have insect populations being disturbed in terms of their ships. And lately, there is an increase again in terms of mosquito-borne diseases. Yeah, those of us who are not used to all this data, I'm just saying, my humble suggestion is that us being so-called religious leaders, we need to have some of these examples at hand to impress upon the younger generation. And we do not have time to look at specific Quranic verses. Datuk says there's 40 references to salah in the Quran. There's more than 1,000 references. This is not to compete at all. There's more than 1,000 verses in the Quran that talks about nature. And it includes also man's mishandling of nature. And lots of that biodiversity. What's this big deal about biodiversity? It expresses the range and the variety of life on the planet, considering the abundance of ecosystems, species and genes, including human diversity, our cultures and languages. And guess what? Biodiversity menampung kehidupan. It's the basis of life. It is all these ecosystems that actually provide us with resources such as protection and formation of water. Okay, water catchment areas are not to be deforested, but I witnessed in my own neighborhood the water catchment area slowly being deforested by people who want to build nice houses for the rich people. I'm sorry. To the rich people, with the greatest respects. It provides nutrient storage and cycling, pollution breakdown and absorption. It gives us food, medicine resources, food products, aquatic habitat, and many undiscovered applications. So I'm sorry, we need to understand what biodiversity is and stop its destruction. And more than 50% of the world's wetlands, forests are gone. And we all know that rainforests support 60% of the world's species of plants and animals. And today, only 1.7 million species are known out of an estimated 100 million species that God has created, estimated only. And preservation of biodiversity is actually a critical priority. Once lost, species cannot be replaced by human technology, and our potential of new foods, medicines, and other technologies may be forfeited forever. And we are losing 50,000 species per year, gone forever. And in 100 years, half of the species God has created will be gone. And for Muslims, how is man Khalifatullah? How? Why do we say we are vicegerent of Allah and that nature is an amanah, is a trust? What have we done to the trust? For Buddhists, I hope you can adopt Khalifatullah also. The concept, I'm sure you do. And now, how do we link this to our work? And I think religion is often mistakenly thought to be concerned with the hereafter only. but the hereafter actually begins to be here in the now. And in Malaysia, there's a window of opportunity because the last budget announcement by our Prime Minister, he announced that the environmental social governance will be one of the key performance indicators of ministers of the cabinet, and maybe INEP and IKIM and JAS can take hold of this opportunity and do something. Okay, poverty, coming to the end already. Poverty is very much the business of religion. Okay, poverty describes the absolute relative lack of basic goods and services. A starting point for discussion of human social economic needs as part of our definition of sustainability. I deliberately use secular language to describe things because sometimes in the religious area we talk too much of we use spiritual concepts all the way through and through, you know, and then we get moved emotionally, but it all begins with the tangibles. So you have to change the economic model, you have to change the technological model, like the Dr. General said this morning, and this is the role of religion and ethics. Don't waste time quarreling with people who don't have the same worldview as you. Build bridges. And ethics is the bridge between sustainability and religion. Sustainability is what the secular world, dominantly secular world, wants to get at. But they can't do it through rational means alone. They need religion. And what is the bridge? And what is the item that can, you know, make us be able to work with them? It is ethics. And we have to understand how they view ethics and how we view ethics. And it is slowly being accepted also that religious ethics is important in the quest for sustainability. And when we said earlier that everybody is now jumping on the bandwagon of sustainability, okay, every area, in agriculture, in automotive industry, okay, people are wanting to jump on the bandwagon of sustainability, not realizing that it is not merely, more technology, is more manipulation of the money market or what have you. Okay? So these are just examples. Okay. In business, we're talking about sustainability, but for us, about religion and sustainability, what have we done? So this book, which is I am touring, this is done by our Buddhist colleague, Chi Yuk-Ling, and I'm sure Dr. Chandra remembers this. She put a very small compilation of religious thinking in Malaysia vis-a-vis nature. And you know, we all hang on to this in our environmental classes, environmental ethics classes, because we, coming from the conventional side, there are no such textbooks until recently. And we have books like Science and Public Policies, Lessons from History of Science by our engineer friend, Aswaka Ahmad Musayi. These are all done in the 80s. So what about now? So I think maybe today's meeting will be a good starting point for us to work harder at producing more material. So in conclusion, I would say that there will be no peace without sustainability. Sustainability because physical and spiritual efforts, religion and science are needed. Science, or including ecology, economics, regarding culture, these are the three pillars of sustainability. And the language and instruments for sustainability is to take on board spiritual concepts and spiritual means here, the theory as well as the practice, and we need to strengthen our networking for moving, I know, to IKIM. I will do something because in Islam, the weakest form of faith or iman is just hating something in your heart. The next level is you have to change it by talking about it, by saying things about it. And the best form is to actually change it tangibly. And just to share, these are friends from the Buddhist tradition. Okay, I think we can agree with this. Peace can never be attained by passively waiting for it. Everything that is needed to build a culture of peace exists in each of our hearts. So, thank you so much. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Prof. Azizan, for giving us a synoptic view of the relation of science, religion, nature, and economy from the perspectives of both Islam as well as Buddhism, the convergence and otherwise of the two perspectives. Our next speaker is Mr. Pajan Sulak Sivaraksa from Bangkok. He's one of the founders of INEP, the International Network of Engaged Buddhists, and his write-up His brief biography is written here. If you're interested, you can read it. And without further ado, may I now invite Mr. Ajahn Sulaksi Baraksa to give his presentation, please.
The Venerable Mahakosunanda of Cambodia, considered to be the Cambodian Gandhi, published only one book entitled Step by Step, which is a well-known guide to Buddhist practitioners. The chapter entitled Present Moment is a mother of the future. Reminds us that if we want to talk about future, we also need to take care of the present. A new paradigm for the future must also focus on present and how we can change our societies to be more peaceful, just, and harmonious with nature. Bhikkhu Buddha-Thasa, perhaps the most well-known Siamese Buddhist monk, declared that to follow the teaching of the Buddha, which means to become awake, one must practice how to transform greed into generosity, hatred into loving kindness, and delusion into wisdom or real understanding. One should learn to be less selfish and care more for others, sentient beings. We argue that the essence of other religions is similar in encouraging followers to work for personal liberation as well as for social justice and environmental balance. One should not regard our friends' religions as inferior to ours. Each religion is unique. If we understand to translate worldly language into spiritual language, we would respect all the scriptures, whether the Bible or the Quran, as they are there to guide us to be better human beings and serve others more than ourselves. Those of different religions should work together, also with non-believers, for the betterment of humankind. I do not know whether the messages of these renowned Buddhist scholars belong to the new paradigm for future society or not, but they do have relevance in this consumerist society. When the International Network Engaged Buddhists first started more than 20 years ago, it provided a space for Kalyana Mitra, good friends, to share experiences and support each other with independent initiatives. Bhikkhu Buddha-Thasa and Mahakosunanda kindly became our patrons of IKIM until both of them has passed away. In recent years, we have been developing more collaborative programs that bring together IKIM members around issues of common concern. So much as happened since we last gathered in Bodh Gaya, India in 2011, around the theme, the future of Buddhism from personal awakening to global transformation. Progress has been made on nearly all of the initiatives we discussed at Bodh Gaya. The Young Buddhist program for youth leaders has continued to expand and develop. And in January 2013, INEP convened an interfaith meeting on Asian women leaders. In September 2012, INEP organized a highly successful interfaith dialogue on religion and climate change. More than 150 people representing Buddhist, Hindu, Christian, Muslim, Baha'i, and animist faith traditions gathered together at the Islander Center in Sri Lanka. An outcome of this event was the formation of the Interreligious Climate and Ecology Network. The INEP Secretariat is playing a key role in coordination and follow-up, and has also been representing an engaged Buddhist perspective at the International Program on Climate Advocacy and Environmental Conservation. The 2012 INEP Advisory and Executive Committees meeting was hosted by the Japanese Network of Engaged Buddhists. During the exchange study tours and side program, INEP members heard first-hand accounts of the Fukushima nuclear disaster, and many of us were able to travel to the affected areas. This experience made it clear that nuclear power is not a viable solution to the climate crisis, and INEP issued a statement supporting an anti-nuclear campaign. And a new development was the emergence of Buddhist-Muslim violence as an international news story, particularly in countries like Burma, Siam, and Sri Lanka. INEP now work with TASC, which now we are holding now this international meeting. Before this, we had a meeting in Bangkok. Now we are having meeting in Kuala Lumpur. Interfaith Dialogue for Peace and Sustainability, and the Special International Buddhism-Muslim Forum on Peace and Sustainability. In terms of education, we in Siam founded Spirit Education Movement, SEM, in 1997 to play the role as a capacity building organization working with transformative educational approaches that integrate inner growth as a foundation for social change and well-being. In Siam, SEM provides capacity building on topics that encourage life skills integrated with developing the heart. They have been offering training to the general public as well as those working with NGOs, businesses, and government institutions to improve working structures and relationships in order for people to develop happiness in the workplace and create balance in their lives. SEM also has outreach programs in neighboring Laos and Burma, implementing broader and long-term projects which focus on empowering civil society groups to participate in transforming their own lives so that they are able to define their own needs and work together to meet them. These projects are helping to build resilience among diverse communities in the face of increasing pressure from economic globalization and consumerism. In 1997, we in Siam organized the Alternatives to Consumerism International Gathering at Buddha Mandala near Bangkok. Groups and individual pioneers from all over the world, but especially from Asia, join and exchange experiences and vision on alternative development in various areas: education, agriculture, human rights and governance, art and religion. Although we made a very critical analysis of how the corporate world lures people into the illusions of consumeristic culture. At that time, alternative business approaches did not have a strong profile. So, a group of responsible business people came together and founded, in association with similar networks emerging elsewhere in the world, the Social Venture Network. SVM in Siam is a very active and influential business network for 15 years now, and even co-organized with hard international gathering in Siam, Singapore, Japan, and Vietnam. One group of pioneers of this FPN movement want to shape more concretely an alternative approach to business and start with later what was called social enterprise. It was given the name of the land of my ancestor where they started, the Suan Ngan Mima social enterprise, because they worked against the street publishing houses and start the Green Market Network, bringing small-scale organic family farmers and mindful consumers together. The Green Market Network was inspired by the Tenki movement in Japan, which evolved in 1965 as a research, as a reaction of housewives to the Minamata disaster. Food security, which includes food safety, became an issue and is a growing challenge. We do not see the challenges around food security separate from other issues. For our understanding, food security is part of human security. Which can be effectively addressed in its full complexity with a genuine holistic approach. Therefore, when Bhutan articulates its ideas on cross national happiness by means of the first international conference on cross national happiness held in Thimphu in February 2004, we actively joined the GNS movement and the search for new development paradigm. In 1907, we, in partnership with many others, organized the third international conference on GNS in Nong Khai, the far provincial town of Siam next to Laos, and also in Bangkok, attended by both Prime Minister of Siam and Prime Minister of Bhutan. The conference drew participation from more than 900 people from all over the world, including a promising group of young people, particularly along the Mekong River. After some initial follow-up activities, we decided to consolidate this work in a permanent but small-scale organization, the School for Wellbeing Studies and Research. The three founding partners of the School for Wellbeing are Chulalongkorn University, Bangkok, the Center for Bhutan Studies based in Thimphu, and the Sachen Kosek Nakapati Foundation, a Siamese umbrella for independent civil society initiatives, which I founded in 1968. Apart from research on the well-being society and organizing public debates on happiness, the limits of growth and sustainable development, which experts including Nobel laureate Joseph Stiglitz, Vandana Shiva, Helena Robert Hodge, the Venerable Matthew Ricard, and David Lloyd. The School for Wellbeing started the new organization called Towards Organic Asian Program, together with partners in the Mekong region. Its major achievement is the start of a young organic farmers network. In July 2014, the first Chulalongkorn University Rice Livelihood Summer School will be organized in association with the Rice Livelihood College in Penang. The Rice Livelihood College and the School for Wellbeing will join forces to create a platform where activists and academics can meet. Livelihood Award recipients from all over the world who have been recognized for their outstanding pioneering activism will be resource person in this annual summer school in Bangkok and at Ashram Mongsanit, an alternative eco-village outside the capital. And these ashrams link internationally with alternative villages. Our work is based on the interconnections between small-scale initiatives. Fortunately, a person like Jacob von Uxkel, the founder of the Livelihood Foundation, made the step towards tackling challenges at the worldwide level in order to give local and small-scale initiatives a global voice. Von Uxkel started the World Future Council, WFC, is an international forum made up of 50 eminent personalities from around the world. Together, they form a pressure group for the rise of future generations. The World Future Council brings the interests of future generations to the center of policy making. The Council addresses challenges to our common future and provide decision makers with effective policy solutions. In-depth research underpins advocacy work for international agreements, regional policy frameworks, and national lawmaking, and thus produce practical and tangible results. Recently, the long-awaited report from the UN Secretary General on how the UN should consider the needs for future generations has been released. With assistance of the World Future Council, the title is Intergenerational Solidarity and the Need for Future Generations. The report strongly recommended what the World Future Council has been advocating, to establish a dedicated representative, a High Commissioner for Future Generations. Any clashes from different perspectives and paradigms should be taken seriously, and people should face one another as friends, not enemies, and try to listen to each other. A dialogue could take place if one would not only lend our ears to others, but also open our eyes and our hearts to learn from others, respectfully and humbly. One should also teach oneself that those who tell us what we normally do not expect to hear are our good friends. They could be our external voice of conscience. If what he or she said is nonsensical, he or she should be forgiven. If, however, what was said could be a good criticism on our wrong belief or bad conduct, we should feel grateful and learn to develop critical self-awareness for our own spiritual growth. This would be guarantee towards more sustainable, harmonious, peace, and just future society. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Ajahn Sulaksi Baraksa, for giving us a view of INEP's activities with regard to interfaith dialogue and cooperation between different religious groups in various South Asian countries, basically. Now, our next speaker is Reverend Alan Senauke from the United States. Reverend Senauke is a Soto Zen priest, activist, writer, and musician, honored as a pioneer of socially engaged Buddhism. He is vice abbot of Berkeley Zen Center, where he lives with his family. In 1991, Alan became executive director of the Buddhist Peace Fellowship, where he worked until 2006. He serves on INEP's advisory committee and is a founder of INEP's Think Sangha, a Buddhist social thinkers and activist group. In 2008, Alan founded the Clear View Project, focusing on social change and training in Asia, particularly in Burma and among India's Ambedkarite Buddhists. His book, The Bodhisattva's Embrace, Dispatches from Engaged Buddhism's Frontlines, is published by Clear View Press. May I now invite Reverend Alan Senauke, please.
Thank you. Respected and venerable brothers and sisters, I've come a long way from the United States to be here, and I'm honored to be here at IKIM this morning and to look at all of your wonderful faces, some of whom I know and many I don't. I'd like to thank our hosts, particularly Dr. Azizan Bahaduddin, who I have just listened to and we've hardly met, but hopefully we'll have an opportunity. I'm grateful to be here with an opportunity to hear Dr. Chandra Muzaffar, who I met about 10 years ago at a conference in Thailand, and when I encountered him, I had this vivid experience. Oh, here's a person that I could really learn a lot from. And I've been a subscriber to the Just newsletter and sometimes a contributor to it. And Ajahn Sivaraksa, we know each other for almost 25 years when he was in exile from Thailand and staying in our home in California. And since then we have worked together and agreed and disagreed together and shared many meals and conversations. I continue to consider him to be one of my primary mentors and teachers, and so I'm honored to be here with people who are defining a path for engaged Buddhism and engaged spirituality. I'd like to start by doing something a little different. I'd like to start by breathing together. So find an upright position. Sit yourself straight upright in your chair. And if you like, you can close your eyes. And take a long breath in and let it out very slowly. Just follow your breath as it goes out, and then at the end of that breath, take another breath in. And then if you like, you can move to just a natural, easy kind of breathing. your mind, you may reflect on my words, or you may offer a simple prayer, or you can simply enjoy a feeling of peace, a feeling of being alive together, come from so many different places. The air that we are breathing is a fabric that weaves together all of the life on this planet. Everywhere, every moment, each sentient being right now is breathing. The air may be clean or smoggy. It may be steamy, or it may be crisp and cool as the air is in here. Whatever its quality, it connects us and allows us to be alive together in a common physical activity. This motion of breath marks our life. We are all breathed and we breathe. We do this by way of forces and powers that are beyond our understanding. We may call it Buddha nature, we may call it Allah, we may call it God. Whatever it is, it's beyond our understanding. So please, just enjoy this common act of life. That's where I'd like to begin. But thank you for taking these few minutes to reflect and act together. It's common activity that we need. The essence of my talk today is a simple and challenging principle. All people are chosen. All lands are holy. Let me say that again. All people are chosen, and all lands are holy. I come to this, I think, by way of my own background. I should say that my family, that I was born into a secular Jewish family in the United States. My grandparents and great-grandparents fled religious repression and violence and military conscription in Eastern Europe 100 years ago. And they found a life in the United States. And they were fortunate to do so. There are many of you in this room who have faced or are facing the same kinds of conditions in your own lands. And my heart goes out to you. This is also a human condition. But in this tradition that I carry, we have this idea of the chosen people, of the Jews as the chosen people. And we have this myth of the Holy Land that somehow belongs exclusively, historically, to the Jewish people and not to the people who have also inhabited it for 5,000 years. So I will say that I have never been able to accept these myths. I don't accept visions of chosen people and holy lands, visions that seduce us. This idea of national ethnic, religious identity is in no way sustainable, nor does it lead to peace. So at an early age, I set my religion of birth to the side and began to search for spiritual teachings that fit with how I saw the world. By the time I reached the age of college, I had discovered teachings of Buddhism, which I admired. And I admired something very simple and straightforward about the Buddha's teachings. The Buddha said, I teach about suffering and the end of suffering. And this teaching continues to inspire me. Still, by virtue of my birth and my education, I carry two powerful models in my mind. In Judaism, in Islam, in Christianity, we hear the voice of the prophets who preach justice and righteousness and balance in society, who speak truth to unjust power. In Buddhism, we admire the Bodhisattva, who selflessly places the well-being of others before him or herself. These are two streams of faith from two sides of the world. These elders from the Middle East and these Buddha ancestors. And they converge in my heart. They speak to each other, and I try to listen. When I consider this idea of holy lands, two Zen Buddhist, Mahayana Buddhist sayings come to mind. The first one is this: there's no place in the world to spit. Every place is precious to those who live there. Every place is the center of the world. So of course there is no room for thoughtless actions that defile the land and poison the air and the waters. The path of peace, the path of righteousness, is to take true and equal care of every place on our planet. The second Zen saying that comes to me is this: if you create an understanding of holiness, you will succumb to all errors. If you create an understanding of holiness, you will succumb to all errors. In other words, to place one thing, one person, one principle as holy above others divides the world in two. An exclusive holiness, a holiness that's built on identity. My people, my religion, my nation, plants poisonous seeds of us and them. From these seeds, war and hatred grow. In the name of what is holy, the soil of countless nations has absorbed the blood of invaders, crusaders, soldiers, defenders, martyrs, and more than any of those, countless innocent people. From a Buddhist perspective, our limited view, our self-centered attachment to these views is the source of suffering. Self-centeredness causes us to live at the expense of others. From this root, we create a kind of cultural and national self-centeredness, with individual suffering that manifests as policies of religious and ethnic intolerance, And this is passed on generation to generation, forging chains of anger, chains of suffering out of fear and anger. And then we use violence to enforce this identity. In some of the very first verses of the Dhammapada, the Buddha speaks to this. He says, he insulted me, he hit me, beat me, robbed me. For those who brood on this, violence is instilled. Violence is never stilled through violence regardless. Violence only ceases through love. This is an unending truth. This is what the Buddha said in verse 3 to 5 in the Dhammapada. So with Buddhism and Islam prevalent in Southeast Asia, what we've been seeing is the rise of intercommunal tensions between Buddhists and Muslims in Thailand, Indonesia, Myanmar, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and elsewhere over the last decade. And these tensions are based on fear, and they're fanned by inflammatory words. Our effort in this forum and at this conference and in the mission of International Network of Engaged Buddhists, in the mission of JUST, is to recognize our common humanity and our common right to life. The United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights begins with recognition that the inherent dignity and the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. The enlightened center of Buddhism and the peaceful heart of Islam, along with the essence of so many other religious traditions, are often lost in a world that is governed by global politics and multinational corporations. In my country, coming from America, is the epicenter of that movement. We're the people who got really good at it and are broadcasting it through the world. And that is not something that I am proud of. Where religion and the state and economics join forces, nothing good happens. This unholy alliance is more about power than about faith. In a religious state, the religious community in power has the predominance of power, resources, and often weapons. At this forum, here, we begin with words, but peace and sustainability in Southeast Asia or anywhere across the globe depends on much more than words. We can talk about equality, we can talk about generosity, and all kinds of high-minded principles. But until we recognize that all people are chosen and that we are our brother's brother and our sister's sister, nothing fundamental will change. Again, Article 1 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights says, all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood. Article 25 puts this in concrete terms. Everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for health and well-being for himself and of his family, including food, clothing, housing, medical care, and necessary social services. In a country like Burma, in the turmoil that's going on in Rakhine State, that principle applies to the Buddhists and it applies to the Rohingyas. The same thing in parallel applies to everywhere. There is Buddhist-Muslim conflict and any other kind of ethnic identity-based conflict we encounter. We also recognize that sustainability is a global issue. Southeast Asia suffers from overpopulation and from global warming. Agricultural output is threatened, and fresh water is at a premium even as the oceans rise and overrun low-lying coastal areas. The exponential rise of CO2 from factories, energy production, and fossil-fueled vehicles has destabilized weather patterns, causing unseasonable cyclones, hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods that rake across our continents. These man-made crises will not just go away, nor will they be resolved by conferences or by the actions or technology of any one nation. If all beings are chosen in the sense that our deepest nature is enlightened being, we are also chosen together to face all that we have created. One of my great teachers, someone who participated in INEB, the late Robert Aitken Roshi, wrote a Zen fable with talking animals as one of his last books. It's called Zen Master Raven. And in that, there's a dialogue. The brown bear said, he was preaching right views, right views. And the owl said, well, what are right views? The brown bear said, we're in it together and we don't have much time. We are all in this world together and we don't have much time. Even in the United States, a nation whose lands were stolen from the indigenous peoples and tribes and whose wealth was built on the backs of slaves shipped like cattle from Africa and worked to death on farms and fields. Even in the United States, there are many of us from all religious and political traditions who know that our privilege and our lifestyle and our empire are not sustainable. Today, we are beginning with words, but words are not enough. I hope that the efforts of this forum and in our meetings over the next few days will lead to dedicated and cooperative action and plans to act together. Buddhists and Muslims living in the same cities, farming the same lands, fishing the same rivers and seas, must work hand in hand, as all people on this planet must. If there are differences between us, we must learn to respect and even treasure those differences, even when they seem to contradict our own beliefs. This is the true variety of human creativity. We have to do this creatively and kindly. That will not be easy, but it's necessary if the world itself is to survive. And that's really what's at stake. Will this world survive and the people on it? So let us dedicate the next few days and the work that flows from these days to this common purpose. As we say in Zen, warm hand to warm hand. In our Buddhist traditions, we end our meditation and our prayers and our devotional services with what's called a dedication of merit. The particular form of this dedication varies, but it calls on us to offer our efforts, our abundance, our generosity to all beings, not to hold those benefits for ourselves. I'd like to close by sharing the dedication that we use at my center for our weekly peace service. I hope this will find a resonance in your hearts today. So you can close your eyes again and take a breath. With a deep desire for peace, we have offered light, flowers, and our words and prayers. May the merit of these offerings reach everywhere, to save all sentient beings in worlds of suffering and confusion, to encourage us to nourish compassion and selflessness, to end all wars, to avert the calamities of epidemic and famine, and the destructive forces of fire, water, wind, and earth, to rejoice in our different ways and faiths while realizing the intimate connection of all life on this fragile planet. May we together with all beings realize the path of peace and harmony. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Reverend Alan Sinalki, for sharing with us your thoughts on the present predicament of humanity, the problems facing the world, and the Buddhist response to such a situation, and how we can have a better world through cooperation between different religious groups in solving contemporary humanity's problems and crises, especially in Southeast Asia. And our next speaker is Dr. Chandra Muzaffar. He's the president of JUST, or the International Movement for a Just World, an international NGO based in Malaysia, which seeks to critique global injustice and to develop an alternative vision of a just and compassionate civilization guided by universal spiritual and moral values. Without further ado, may I now invite Dr. Chandra Muzaffar. Please.
Moderator, Professor Hazim, the Director General of IKIM, Dr. Mustafa, Ajan Sulak Sivaraksa, distinguished guests and speakers, sisters and brothers, Assalamu alaikum, salam sejahtera, peace be with you. Let me approach this theme by first looking at peace and then connecting it with sustainability. How can we talk about peace when there is, at this point in time, vertical peace between Muslims and Buddhists in certain parts of the world? This should be our immediate task, how to restore and strengthen peace between Buddhists and Muslims. We have witnessed in the course of the last few years problems between these two communities in Myanmar, Sri Lanka, in Indonesia, in Bangladesh, and for a much longer while in the southern part of Thailand. We have to look at these challenges against the background of the hundreds of years of harmony and amity between Buddhist and Muslim communities in various parts of Asia. That's the history. If you look at scholarly works produced by both Muslims and Buddhists in the past, They speak to a relationship which showed that there was respect and understanding between the two communities. I have often quoted the example of a very well-known Islamic scholar of the 11th century who lived in Central Asia, who wrote extensively about Hinduism and Buddhism in what is today the Indian subcontinent, and how he had, in one of his treatises, paid tribute to the Buddhist statues at Bamiyan, which, as you know, were destroyed in 21 by the Taliban. It shows how things have changed over the centuries. But this is the tradition of understanding and respect that had existed in the past. We have to ask ourselves, friends, why have things become problematic? There are a number of reasons, but I'll try to highlight 5 of them very quickly. Number 1, if you look at certain situations, Myanmar, Thailand, they're related to history. We cannot run away from the fact that in the case of southern Thailand, it is the annexation of a Muslim kingdom, Patani, to a Siamese kingdom, which generated a great deal of ill will. That is one of the major causes of the tensions that have continued over the last century or so. In the case of Myanmar, here again, Arakan was an independent kingdom. It was, again, through coercion, brought within the fold of the Buddhist kingdom of Burma, and we have had problems between the communities, on and off over a period of time, but more serious in recent years. So history is a factor, but it is not the major factor. Political leaders have contributed to these tensions, the way in which they've exploited differences and certain sentiments which are deeply entrenched within the two communities. Religious leaders have contributed to the situation through their distortions, through the manipulation of mass religious sentiments. A segment of the media has also contributed to the situation through its irresponsible reporting of incidents, the way in which certain events are highlighted and presented to the masses. I was in Myanmar a few weeks ago, and I was struck by attempts by Buddhists and Muslims to work together to address common challenges, which are never reported in the mass media. What the mass media would report is when something bloody and ugly happens that is highlighted. Why is it that the mass media, not just in relation to Myanmar, everywhere, why is it that the mass media does not report on the good things that are happening? The acts of solidarity, of cooperation, of conviviality between communities. This, I think, is one of the greatest failings of the mass media. And yet another reason which has contributed to the present situation, it seems to me, is linked to regional and international politics. What does one mean by this? There is no doubt at all that the competition between the United States of America on the one hand and China has affected the politics, the inter-religious ties between Muslims and Buddhists in the country like Myanmar. There is no doubt at all that what's happening in Sri Lanka cannot be divorced entirely from larger geopolitics. We have a government in Sri Lanka which is perceived by the United States of America as moving closer to China, The great concern of the United States of America is whether the pro-Chinese attitude of the government in Colombo would eventually enhance China's access to the Indian Ocean. These are big geopolitical issues, and they have shaped relations between the communities because these major global actors begin to manipulate sentiments because they know that a major fault line in many of our societies is religion. Religious sentiments can be manipulated, they would bring about tensions, and these tensions would benefit one party or the other who may be interested in a particular pattern of power in this region. So we have to keep that in mind too. Do not think for one moment that when something happens it's just because of domestic forces. There are always other larger global forces at work, which we must also take into account. What has this led to, friends? It has led to a situation where we've had unspeakable violence. Hundreds of people have died in Southeast Asia, perhaps thousands, in the last few years as a result of interreligious clashes. We've had the spread of hate speech. It's become pervasive in certain countries, where certain communities are targeted and the masses, they are made to hate a certain community. It is based upon distortions, lies, fabrications, but that doesn't matter. The whole purpose is to create hatred. And as a result of that hatred, you find that certain actors benefit from the manipulation of the situation. What do we do about this, friends? What can we do as civil society actors? Because this situation is serious. It is very, very serious. You saw from the figures presented a while ago that Muslims and Buddhists in Southeast Asia are more or less equally balanced, 42% and 40%. And if ties between Muslims and Buddhists break down, if there is perpetual tension and violence, then you can be sure that ASEAN will collapse. As a regional entity, ASEAN's future depends upon harmonious ties between Buddhists and Muslims in particular. This is the reason why civil society groups must be concerned about what is happening. You cannot allow just politicians or soldiers or the clergy to determine our future. We must be involved. We may not be able to do much, but there are certain things that we can do. We can speak up, we can write, we can network, we can campaign, we can do all these things. We can use the new media to carry an important message to our brothers and sisters in this region and other parts of Asia and the world. Try to understand what is happening in depth. Just don't be misled by certain segments of the media or by the politicians or the clergy or by military personnel. Try to understand what's happening. Why Myanmar has taken this turn, why Thailand continues to be a hotbed of interreligious tensions, especially in the south. Try to understand in depth. This, I think, is what is most critical. Knowledge, understanding. Get the right information. There are a lot of avenues available to us now. Alternative websites. And discuss some of these issues. Access them. This is our fortress. This is what will immunize us from the vile and vicious propaganda of various forces in this region. This is our task. And let's convey this message to the governments, to the army top brass, to the clergy, that we believe that the two communities can continue to coexist in peace and harmony. And we don't want to become victims of this game that some of these powerful elites have chosen to play. At the same time, we want to address an appeal to governments in this region, to the elites in general. in countries which are confronted with these challenges. And what is the message we want to convey to them? Act fairly and firmly when it comes to inter-ethnic and inter-religious issues. I consider this as the 2F principle: be fair and be firm. You have to be fair in dealing with the rights and interests of the different communities. They have to live together. Your responsibility as government, your responsibility as the elite is to ensure that you look after everyone's interests in a fair and just manner. Fairness is critical, but at the same time, you have to be firm. You have to be firm with the extremists, regardless of who they are and where they come from. Doesn't matter what their religious background is, you have to be firm with extremists. You have to nip extremism and fanatical attitudes in the bud. You cannot allow these things to develop. You cannot observe the principle of elegant silence, golden silence in situations like this. You just have to act firmly and expeditiously in dealing with situations of this sort. So that, I think, is very, very important. Be firm, be fair. And we have to convey this message. When it comes to hate speech, take action immediately. If there is a certain individual, even if he is a member of the clergy with a lot of support, one has to act against him. This is what we expect of our governments. This is what we expect of elites with influence and power. Friends, I think it is important for us to understand this, that peace can only be restored, inter-religious harmony is only possible if governments and the people as a whole are alert to what is happening and they're prepared to act. Peace is vital for sustainability. If you look at the history of all civilizations, the ability of a civilization to sustain itself depends upon its ability to maintain peace. We know, for instance, in the case of the Roman Empire, the so-called Roman peace was a vital factor in the way in which it functioned over a long period of time. So peace is important, but other values are also important. Justice is important in sustaining a civilization. Equality, freedom, these are all important values in sustaining a civilization. And these are values which have become known to all of us, partly because of the European Enlightenment, even though they are rooted in our respective religions and cultures, but it was the European Enlightenment which pushed these values to the forefront, values of equality, values of freedom, and so on. But there are other values which the European Enlightenment has not highlighted. And these are the values which religions like Buddhism and Islam can bring to the fore. When we talk about sustaining a civilization, when we talk about sustainability as a virtue, we also have to pay attention to values such as love and restraint. I highlight these two values because they are very close to the heart of these two religions. Love is important in both Islam and Buddhism. It's related to compassion in both these religions. Likewise, restraint, observing limits. It's a virtue in both Buddhism and Islam. In fact, these are two religions that give a lot of emphasis to restraint. Restraint in our relationship with nature, resources, in our relationship with other communities, with your own family, with yourself. So restraint is a very important value. It is critical at this juncture to bring these values to the forefront because of the situation that human civilization is in. It has been said before by others on this panel that contemporary civilization is at one of its most critical junctures. One is not even certain whether we'll be able to survive the 21st century. Human civilization as we know it today. And unless we bring these values to the fore and translate these values into policies and laws and institutions and structures, I do not see much hope for humankind. There's been a tendency for a very long while to scoff at values like love and compassion or even restraint, because somehow these are seen as soft values. For a very long while, human civilization had deluded itself into believing that what keeps a civilization going, what perpetuates the civilization, are hard principles related to power and coercion, violence and dominance. That this is what explains the strength of the civilization: power, conquest, dominance. But now we know, friends, after a few centuries, that this doesn't work. We are in this mess because of force and violence and coercion. It is because of our desire to dominate nature, to rape and ravage the resources that have been gifted to us, that we are in such a mess. We are in this mess because we have developed an economy that is based upon elite dominance. The masses have been ignored. Growing disparities between rich and poor. This is unsustainable. When wealth is concentrated in the hands of a few, how can you sustain a society or a civilization? We now begin to realize this. You cannot sustain a political system that is based upon adversarial politics. Politics has to be based upon cooperation, understanding, empathy, not on adversarial relationships. We are seeing it, aren't we? Look at what's happening in the United States of America. That's politics based upon adversarial relationships. The Republicans, the Democrats, the government is shut down, a new deadline, another crisis. What is this? Is this the model for humankind? Is this the sort of democracy that the United States and the Western powers want to export to the rest of the world? It's a joke. This sort of democracy is a joke. And we have to understand this. It's not sustainable. Likewise, if you look at culture, culture based on sensate needs, a culture that stimulates a type of consumption which is just unsustainable. How can this sort of civilization go on? This is why we need alternative values. Values related to love and compassion, empathy and restraint. The ability to control ourselves. And these are values, as I said a while ago, they come from our great religious philosophies. We have to harness them, we have to develop them, we have to give them meaning through institutions and structures, through laws and policies. That's the challenge that awaits us. We have tried to do it. We have done it in certain areas, but there's much more to be done. This is the alternative that we have to articulate with strength and with conviction. Friends, I want to conclude by quoting from a person who understood the role of these values, who created a mass movement based on human dignity in order to achieve the goals that he had set out for himself and his people. He was not a Muslim and he was not a Buddhist. He was a Christian. But in his actions, he transcended religious boundaries. He was truly universal. The person that I'm referring to is Martin Luther King. One of the great personalities of the last century, was also a truly spiritual human being. a spirituality that transcended religious boundaries, which is the genuine spirituality that has to provide the basis for the 21st century. And Martin Luther King, he said, power without love is reckless and abusive. And love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice. I repeat, power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice. And justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Chandra for that articulate and profound presentation. I always like to hear Dr. Chandra speaking. I always have something new to learn each time I hear him speak. And I very much like his, for lack of a better word, his culturalist, or what I would call the religio-culturalist approach to our present problems. And this I would contrast to the rather economistic approach or perspective taken by most of our world leaders today in dealing with what I believe are cultural conflicts. And although I do not share the view which Huntington developed in his book on clash of civilizations, where he pinpoints cultural factors rather than economic factors as the source of a conflict. But I think there is something there's some truth to the idea that it is religious and cultural factors or elements that are the underlying cause of some of our conflicts. And taking an economistic approach, like for example, creating economic zones, trying to achieve regional economic integration to solve problems in southern Thailand and Mindanao, I think is rather wrong-minded. It's like giving cough medicine to treat a headache, for example, wrong medicine for wrongly identified ailment. So in this context, I think attempts by civil societies to build bridges across different cultures, different religious groups and so on, is, I think, the right approach to take. If not the primary approach, at least a complementary approach, rather than depending heavily on political and economic approaches to solve some of these conflicts, which I believe has to be tackled at its source, i.e. the different religious doctrines and practices. Although they are, of course, interlaced with economic forces, economic factors and so on, but it is, I think, a factor in its own right which should be given its own kind of consideration. So I think we have time for some question and answer session before we end. Can I take questions from the audience? Oh, thank you. Oh, they have to go to the time for questions. Okay. So I was told by the organizer that the monks have to leave by 11:30, and so there is no time for question and answers. So So I was advised that the monks can leave for lunch now and the rest can stay for Q&A. I think that's the best solution.
I'm very sorry, Venerables. We'll have to talk to you later.
I hope that it's being fair and firm. Eh? Thank you. Yes, are there any questions to be presented to the speakers? We'll take a few questions for the first round. Yes?
Thanks very much. My name is Nicole. I'm Malaysian. I have just two comments and one question. I'll keep it brief. Too much has been said today about Thailand and Burma. I would like to maybe talk a bit about Malaysia, the country that I come from. I feel that I curled up while listening to the panelists, especially Malaysian panelists, who I would say maybe did not really address what's happening in Malaysia at the moment. Maybe if I could just give a short brief, what happened in Malaysia recently was few Buddhists who had prayed in a surau, a small mosque, was actually were not allowed to do so, and the Buddhists who prayed in this Muslim prayer room, the Muslim prayer room was abolished by the state government because it said that the surau, the prayer room lost its sanctity. And also, the owner of the hotel was jailed by the state government of Malaysia. And this is what happened in Malaysia, I would say, recently. And in Malaysia, people with alternative views in Islam or Buddhism, but I would say Islam majority, is persecuted today. And I was a bit upset with Dr. Mustafa, who came up to say about sexual perversions. Being a gay man, being a person who practices faith, who has reconciled my sexuality with my religion, I think talking about peace, it was quite a violent intimidation towards me and my sexuality. So I would maybe like us to address this. How do we talk about peace, sustainability, and interfaith without addressing these things, without talking about these things? Maybe if any of the panelists could address it. And my question to Dr. Chandra Muzaffar, you talked about coming up and standing up firm towards people who use fanatic languages. But recently in a forum in Burma, you had, on a multiculturalist forum in Burma, you had justified Perkasa. Perkasa is a Malaysian right-wing group who intimidates minorities in this country. So you had said that they base their struggles on constitutional grounds. So maybe if you could address us on your contradictory remarks today, that would be good. So that's my question. Thanks.
Okay, we'll take one more question before we hand over the questions to the panelists. One more question for this first round. Please identify yourself.
I came from Bangladesh.
My name is Santuchita Chakma. I am General Secretary, Chittagong Hilltop Moripiti Welfare Association. I heard the speech very attentively. I don't know in other countries what is happening, but in Chittagong Hilltop, it was started in 1979. About 500,000 Bengali Muslim settlers brought in Chittagong Hilltop. The two settled them in Chittagong Hilltop. More than 1 dozen massacres carried out by the Bengali Muslim settler backed by army. So it is not possible for us to survive in Chittagong Hilltop without your help. I have a written speech. If I get time, if you give permission, then I should read out next time. Thank you.
Okay, can we have the response from the panelists to these two questions? Dr. Chandra.
Thank you very much for that question. This is a good example of someone who picks up something from the video without providing the context. The question I was asked in Myanmar was whether Perkasa was an organization like the 969 movement in Myanmar, and whether one could say that Perkasa's activities, this was a guy who had been to Malaysia, but someone from Myanmar, whether one could compare this to what Perkasa has been saying and doing here. And I said, no, there's a very big difference. And I'm going to say that again here in the Malaysian audience because I don't speak different languages to different audiences. Perkasa, examine all the positions that it has taken. There have been occasions where Perkasa has said things which violate the Constitution, and we have come out openly and said that it's wrong. For instance, Perkasa had argued that scholarships should not be given to non-Malays. And I responded to that by saying that it is in the Constitution that non-Malays are also entitled to scholarships. That's the position that I take. But at the same time, when Perkasa defends the Malay language, as provided for in the Constitution, when Perkasa defends the position of Islam, as provided for in the Constitution, when you have some people going around trying to belittle the position of the Malay language or Islam, what Perkasa is doing is also in line with the Constitution. So you have to be fair. You have to be fair in evaluating organizations like this. This, I think, is a very big problem in Malaysian society. A lot of people who talk about rights and about justice, they just see it from a very partial angle. They don't look at it from the other side. And this, to my mind, is one of the reasons why ethnic relations have deteriorated in this country. This very partial, communal way of looking at justice and giving the impression to the world that what you're talking about is justice. How can one compare Perkasa to the 969 movement in Myanmar? That is a movement which has proven to be violent, which advocates violence openly, which discriminates against Muslim shopkeepers, which makes this anti-attitude towards Muslims so much a part of its ideology. You don't have any group in Malaysia that is an equivalent to that movement in Myanmar. Let's be fair. I'm not running down any particular group, but we're just looking at realities. So in Malaysia, there are communal groups. I regard the Dong Jong, when it comes to certain positions it takes, as communal. I regard the Hindraf group, when it takes certain positions, as communal. But certain other concerns of Hindraf, like concerns pertaining to jobs for the Indians and about their marginalization, I endorse that. Likewise, in the case of Dong Jong, when Dong Jong talks about the right to study one's mother tongue, I have no problem with that. But when Dong Jong takes a strong position against increasing by just minutes, a few minutes, from 170 minutes to 240 minutes, the amount of time given to the national language in Chinese primary schools. When you take that sort of position, I say that Dongjong is communal. So one has to defend one's evaluation. I hope I've answered your question. I'm not going to respond to your question about the other thing in reference to the DG. I don't know whether you would want to respond, but my own position is also very clear. You can look at my latest ebook. There's an interview with an Iranian journalist where I address that question. And that's a position that I've taken consistently right through. And anyone who tries to justify certain aspects of social behavior, of sexual behavior in particular, by saying, oh, this is justified in the name of religion, they are lying. Thank you.
I just would like to address the gentleman from the Chittagong Hill Tracts. You were raising the issue of the situation of the tribal peoples in the Chittagong Hill Tracts, yes? Is that correct? At any rate, he was describing the influx of Bengali settlers into the hill tracts, which have historically been occupied by Buddhist and animist tribal peoples. And that is some of the richest agricultural land in the country. And you're looking at a country that is facing an enormous population explosion. And so as Dr. Muzaffar said at the beginning of his talk, when you look at a domestic situation, you also have to look at all of the interests that are involved in that situation. You have to do what my friend here in the room, Jill Jameson, talks about as conflict mapping. See who benefits from the conflict, whose interests are dominant and whose interests are powerful. So obviously the Bangladeshi government, backed up by the army, has a stake in supporting the proliferation of Bengali settlers into the hill tracts. And this is fundamentally an unjust situation, one that has been recognized by the United Nations and other investigative bodies as unjust, and yet it persists. And I think that one of both the opportunities we've had at INEB over the last 20 years has been to recognize the situation of the tribal peoples in the Chittagong Hill Tracts. And still, I would say, there is much, much work to do. This is unfinished, and actually the continuation of these cultures is very much at risk. So the question is, what do we do about that, and how do we promote harmony in a situation where there are very real pressures that are happening within Bangladesh itself, and yet those pressures are being imposed on tribal people in the form of massacres, displacements, and the loss of their land. So I really feel for that situation, and I hope that we can continue to address it, and address it in an effective way across all of our Buddhist cultures.
Yes, I think we have a question to ask. You want to ask?
Yes, hello. Hi, my name is Minette Nimanaha. I'd like to thank the esteemed panelists for your wonderful speeches today. I think you've opened up a lot of issues. And one of the things I'd like to address in my question is really how do we, in the next 5 to 10 years, systematically evaluate and change our institutions so that they become more effective at policing within themselves on every level. And I'm talking about really spiritual communities. Because I think, as a young person looking at all of these different systems, I'm wondering, why is it that leaders are unable to police each other within religious social communities? How is it that moderate pacifist voices are so weak in comparison to extremist violent voices? And I'm not just talking about the media and putting all of, I mean, certainly the media is one of, the big agents of this, but certainly why is it that within institutions, institutional leaders are unable to check each other? So that's one of my main fundamental questions, because I think if we do not address that question, then we can continue to have these conferences where we're talking and preaching to the choir, but nothing really happens. Right? And then the other question, so there's that question at the leadership level. And then the other question is, how do people, at all other levels, all practitioners, all members of the community, can hold their leaders accountable? So those are my two questions.
Okay, we'll take one more question before we end this second and I think the last round. Yes.
Dr. Kirtiraj from India, Maharashtra, Pune. I'll be looking at this piece and harmony and sustainability from the Indian point of view. Because what I believe is peace and harmony is not possible unless the basic questions of the people are solved. If there is a caste, if there is an inequality, if there is not an equal distribution of resources, talking about peace is all sterile things. In India, there's a lot of inequality. The basic needs of the people are not fulfilled. There's a lot of domination, and the people in Indian society are so stratified that there is absolutely no scope for peace and harmony, and people have to struggle for their each and every right. So peace and harmony is possible if the basic needs of the people are addressed, people are empowered, and that's how we look at peace and harmony. Thank you.
Okay, can we have the response from the panelists?
Just quickly to your point just now, thank you, because you made a point that I meant to mention. The problem that I have with dialogue is that if dialogue does not relate to a more equal access and distribution of resources, then it's just a lot of empty talk. So your point is well taken. Minette, the first question, as I understand it, I may ask you to restate it. Go ahead.
Sure. So I want to know, why is it that religious leaders are not able to check each other?
That religious leaders are not able to check each other. You mean, what do you mean check?
Well, we have a lot of different factions within every religion. And perhaps it is because we don't all have a shared goal. But within religions, I know there are often conventions, there are often meetings amongst religious leaders. So why is it that the moderate voices are not able to check the extremist violent voices? Are they so outside the institutions of these leaders that like, what are, I know that there are obviously politics involved, but I want to know exactly why is it that these factions are able to do what they do?
Thank you very much for a very thoughtful question from a young lady. Well, one of the reasons I alluded to in my earlier intervention, I think the media is partly to blame because they don't highlight the other voices, partly because, you know, the adage which governs the media, when a dog bites a man, it's not news. But when a man bites a dog, then it becomes news. I mean, this is the way it's always been. And I think this is what we have to change as far as the way in which the media reports events go. So media is part of that. But there are two other reasons why I think this happens. One, in some societies, you find that alternative voices from within religious circles, these voices are weak. They're weak because there is no intellectual, ethical tradition in that society which has, for a period of time, articulated the alternative. A good example of that is my own country, Malaysia. You find that from within religious circles, the alternative voices on many issues pertaining to Islam are weak, and that goes for the other religions too. You look at Christianity, I find that a much greater rapport with Christians in other countries and Christians in Malaysia on issues of social justice, on issues pertaining to inter-religious ties, and the same thing with Buddhists, Hindus and others. So that's part of the reason in Malaysia that within the religious community, that tradition, that intellectual, ethical tradition that provides an alternative is weak. The third reason, if you include media as the first, is because a lot of people are afraid to speak up. They're afraid that if they speak up, they will be branded, they will be seen as an outcast, they will not be able to play their role in society. There's a lot of fear. And I think this is what critiques and dissidents will have to overcome. They will have to overcome their fear. Because if they don't, you remember during the Nazi era, what a very famous Christian pastor said? First they came for the communists, since I was not a communist, I chose to keep quiet, and then they came for the socialists and the trade unionists and everyone, one by one, you just choose to keep quiet. Now this, I think, is the greatest problem facing people who are not happy with what's happening, but they do not want to speak up because they're thinking of their own selves, or they are genuinely afraid of what will happen, and there may be some basis for their fear, but nonetheless they must speak up. That is what is most critical. Thank you.
I want to address the issue of India. Of course, India is an oppressive country, particularly the caste system. That's why Buddhism could not last in India. That's why they chuck Buddhism out. But looking positively, the Dalits have now become empowered, partly because they become Buddhist, and they now empower themselves. And I think if the Dalit will grow, and they grow much more in number, quantitatively and qualitatively, they will become governor, they will become a leader in various levels. Yet, they need to grow more compassion. They need to learn not to hate the Brahmins. What they should learn is to restructure the caste system, which, with all my great respect for Gandhiji, he failed that. The caste system has to be restructured in the Buddhist way, not to hate the Brahmins, not to hate the top, but that has to be restructured. But in this sense, I haven't said something negative about Gandhi, but now the Gandhi Peace Foundation, leading by Raja Gopal, a leading Gandhian. The last 5 years, Raja Gopal has been marching all over India, using different religious tradition, culture, singing songs, and now they're demanding that every Indian must have the rights to land, have the right of dignity. And now the government is agreeing after 5 years. If they don't agree, they will march to Delhi, 100,000 to topple the government non-violently. And at the last meeting, they invite me to be the keynote speaker, and I think they will win non-violently. I think we should learn the same method, using to topple the Thai government non-violently very soon. Thank you. Agree or disagree? If you agree, you don't have to speak. If you disagree, you can challenge me after lunch, but you have to close now. You can talk privately, okay? You can talk privately at lunchtime, okay?
Yeah, I think we can carry the conversation after lunch.
Okay. Please, have microphone. Take microphone.
See, you did say that there is a caste system in India, and the Dalits are the worst of the caste system. But you should also know what place Gandhi has in the minds of the Dalits in India. If somebody goes to Dalits with the Gandhian philosophy and Gandhian ideals, he will lose his deposit. Because the Gandhi, the way Dalit, they look at the Gandhi, they look at the Gandhi as their enemy. So Gandhian principles and Gandhian ideology and Gandhian values has nothing to do with the Dalits. The Gandhian values have killed the Dalits, and that is how Gandhi has no place, absolutely no place in the life of Dalits in India. Sorry.
Let's keep it brief because we have to end at 12.
I'm Professor Sudharani from Ambedkar Open University, Hyderabad, India. I just want to react, like it's a kind of Dalit assertion cannot be mistaken as hatred or aggression. So this is an identity, aggression, and fight for the rights, not an aggression or a hatred towards Brahmanism or Brahmins in India. Because Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar has never has a hatred towards Brahmins, but against the Brahmanism, the teachings, the practices, or the oppression of the millions of the people in the name of religion. Each religion preaches peace, but Hinduism, as a religion, gave space for the fragmentation, oppression, and untouchability, and segregated the people. Thank you.
Thank you. And since it's almost 12 o'clock and we have to end this session here, so I suppose the engagement ends at this stage, at this point in time, and I would like the audience to join me in thanking the panelists for the excellent dialogue.
Thank you to the Honorable Professor Muhammad Hazim Shah. We would like to thank the moderator and the panelists for the enlightening presentation and discussion, which will most certainly contribute to the enhancement of knowledge on the topic presented. Ladies and gentlemen, as a token of appreciation to their contribution, I would like to call upon Yang Berbahagia Datuk Nik Mustafa Jini Ahsan, Director General of IKIM, to present a memento to our panelists, moderator, and to the co-organizers. Firstly, to Yang Berbahagia Dr. Chandra Muzaffar, secondly, to the Honorable Ajahn Sulat Sibaraksa, next to Reverend Alan Sadoki, to the moderator of this session, Honorable Professor Muhammad Hazim Shah, to the Honorable Dr. Harsha Kumara Navar, to Mr. Anas Zubaidi. Membahagia Datuk. Datuk ni, please. Mr. Anas Zubaidi from JAS. Alright. We have also the Honorable Dr. Harsha. And last but not least to Professor Datin Dr. Azizan from Institute of Islamic Understanding Malaysia, IKIM. Thank you Yang Berbahagia Datuk Lee Mustafa Haji Ahsan. And now I would like to call upon the Honorable Ajahn Sulat Siwaraksa to give a memento to Datuk Lee Mustafa Haji Ahsan. Some sort of exchange of gifts today. And also to Mr. Anas Zubaidi. And finally, I would like to invite again Mr. Anas Zubaidi to present a memento to Datuk Nik Mustafa Haji Ahsan. And also to the Honorable Ajahn Sulat Siwaraksa. Alright, and with that we have concluded the closing of International Buddhist-Muslim Forum on Peace and Sustainability organized by the Institute of Islam.